All right, ladies and gentlemen, going to try to make a quick video, but you know me, I never do that. We're going to do some PvP stuff today. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get on Classic Discord here, and not Classic Discord, Classic World of Wowhead, basically. But this is where we can look at the runes and stuff and the different classes, and yada, yada, yada. And I just wanted to go over the classes one by one. So I think in this video I'm going to start with Priest. I actually did a really long video with Talrain talking about what we thought about Priest in Season of Discovery. Keeping it relatively chill, not to give like specifics away about how to deal with them as Paladin, like just what we thought about them in general. But it degenerated basically into damn near a Palicast episode. I still have it recorded over there. I probably won't be uploading it just because it's so long. It's like an hour video, but if you want me to upload it, I'll upload it. But it starts off talking about Priest, but then it goes off into tangents about Warlocks and stuff. So when I'm done recording this video, I'll also probably talk about Warlock at the same time. But the really key bit of information I wanted from him was I have a Holy and a Holy Reckoning perspective on PvP matchups. I wanted him for more of a deep ret and a reckoning perspective of the matchups. And it turns out with fighting priests that almost nothing changes. You're in a mana war. You're wearing shadow resist gear, but you don't want to wear too much shadow resist gear. You're beating the crud out of them, and you're using Seal of Wisdom almost exclusively because again you're in that damn mana war. All right, so yeah, let's continue here. So Shadow Priest was kind of interesting in the sense that they got a bit more damage, but not as much as you would think. They have some utility that theoretically could be a little scary for a number of classes, like Strength and Soul and so forth and so on. But they still have their one main and critical weakness that they've historically had in Classic World of Warcraft is they have mana issues. In Classic WoW, they have massive mana issues. They're basically gods until they run out of mana. That is the story of Priest in Classic World of Warcraft. They are gods until they run out of mana. There are a few other classes that got a bunch of buffs that also maintain, or I should say retain, their traditional weakness of mana issues. Elemental Shaman comes to mind. If you didn't look at Shaman, the only thing they even remotely got to help them with mana issues is you can take Water Shield. That's not really going to do anything. Wait. Maybe it's one of the more updated Water Shields. Granting 1% of your maximum mana per 5 seconds. That's not bad. When a spell or melee or ranged attack hits the caster, 4% of maximum mana is restored to the caster. This expends one water globe activated, blah, blah, blah. But you can see Water Shield comes at the expense of Molten Blast, Lava Last, Lava Burst. However, it's highly advised that if you're going to PvP against certain classes as an Elemental Shaman, ones that are going to try to run you out of mana like a Paladin, that you take Water Shield. So this is at least the decent version of Water Shield, where it's giving you a percentage of your maximum mana. So I can get behind that. And of course, traditionally, a Water Shield doesn't actually cost mana. But back to Priest. Priest doesn't have anything like that whatsoever, which is kind of sad. And I really wish they would have gotten something to help them with their mana. But as it stands, they beat basically every class in the game except for a handful of classes that can go toe-to-toe with them and out mana war them. All right, so let's start. You have Serendipity. Serendipity basically just makes their healing kind of intense and insane. So healing with Flash of Light reduces the cast time of your next, basically any heal they possibly have in the game by 20% for 20 seconds, and it stacks up to 3 times. So basically, this means that your greater heals turn into flashes of light, or even more reduction than that. They can be healing machines, like single target healing machines, AOE healing machines. But again, they have that mana issue. So priests in Classic World of Warcraft, I could be wrong about this, but they really love stacking spirit gear and plus healing. And they like trying to worship at the altar of spirit regeneration as much as possible. And Serendipity does not help them with that at all in any way, shape, or form. It just makes them gods of healing for as long as their mana bar can hold out, both in an AoE context and in a single target context. But other than that, it's not really doing much. This thing is borderline useless in PvP, and it's super useless for anything that is going to drop the cast time below 1.5 seconds because you're still on the 1.5 second GCD, unless this thing also affects GCDs, which I hope it would. But it might not. The only PvP context this thing could possibly have is it could help them with downranking if they're getting off a flash of light in like a second or less, and they can keep up with the GCD of that. It's not the worst thing in the world. It could be good for weaving heals in combat. Like, that is a thing in PvP. Weaving heals like in between people's auto attacks, or weaving a heal inside of a GCD. So, for example, you see that elemental shaman. He just actually they don't have a lot of. Yeah, it would have to be putting down a totem. So the elemental shaman just dropped a totem. He's on a 1.5 second GCD. If you can get a heal off before he can Earthshock you, then that's actually not the worst thing in the world. For PvP, however, Strength and Soul, in my opinion, might be even better. So this is what it's opportunity costed against. Lesser heal, greater heal, and flash heal. So basically everything that any heal you're possibly going to use. Remaining reduces the remaining duration of your weakened soul on the target by 4 seconds. So priests in classic World of Warcraft, even shadow priests, they have a really powerful bubble shield. They can put it on them every 15 seconds. So you bubble shield something, and then you can't bubble shield it again for 15 seconds. But what this is saying is that if you're casting any kind of healing at the same time, it'll reduce that by 4 seconds, which is kind of intense and insane, and would pair extremely well with downranking. Because you're not super interested in the heal so much as you are in getting your bubble back as quickly as possible. This thing would absolutely crush the hopes and dreams of many a warrior. Warriors hate to see bubble shields in classic World of Warcraft. I know they've gotten some rage generation bonuses, but traditionally their rage generation is absolutely garbanzo if you're doing anything to screw with them. And one of the best ways to screw with their rage generation other than armor is bubble shields, because while a warrior is beating on a bubble shield, they generate no rage, and it's absolutely horrifying. In fact, it permeates the meta of priest versus warrior. I played warrior back in the day. When you're fighting a priest, you have to. It looks like the dumbest thing in the world because you're saving your mortal strike, and you're saving your whirlwind precisely for when the priest bubbles. That way you can expend your rage to delete the bubble immediately, because it's only white attacks. It's only your auto attack Andes that generate rage for you as a warrior. So the way you fight against warriors is you watch them expend all their mana. They drop down to like my bad mana, all their rage. If you watch a warrior drop down to 10 rage and you have any kind of bubble shield that you can throw on yourself, Arena Grandmaster, Burrower Shell Trinket, the Arathi Basin bubble trinket, whatever. You just throw that on yourself. They're going to be rage starved for like 15 seconds because they're not going to. They have to beat through the shield using white attacks, and they're not going to generate any rage off the white attacks, and it's just a nightmare scenario for them. So you have to hold a lot of rage. Really, really good against warrior. This thing might actually be one of these two might actually be a surprise smash hit in PvP. Twisted Faith. Okay, Mind Flay and Mind Blast deal 20% increased damage to targets afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain. There's actually not all across all the runes available to a Shadow Priest. There isn't all that much in the way of DPS gains, believe it or not. There's probably about a 30% DPS gain for Shadow Priests in the grand scheme of things that they can possibly get access to, and this is easily one of the biggest, increasing Mind Blast and Mind Flay's damage by 20%, as long as the enemy cannot cleanse Shadow Word Pain. is actually a really, it's a lot more than you would think, because as a Shadow Priest, these are your primary damage dealing abilities. Like this is everything, primary damage dealing ability. Your primary damage dealing abilities are Mind Flay. It's by far the most mana efficient spell you have as a Shadow Priest, and again, mana is your Achilles heel as a Shadow Priest. The only problem with it is that it is a channel, which means that if somebody is beating on you and reducing that channel time, she becomes very mana inefficient very quickly. You combine it, of course, with the Bubble Shield, and it starts doing work. It does slow the target. Mind Flay, absolutely amazing ability. You try to use that as much as possible as a Shadow Priest, and Mind Blast, of course, is used on cooldown. So this is one of their really big damage-dealing increases. It is opportunity costed, of course, against Void Plague. Afflict a target with a disease that causes, blah shadow damage over 18 seconds. It is an additional, damn it, what am I trying to say? It is additional dot on the target, but you'll notice that it does say in the tooltip that she is in fact a disease, and that is a bit of a problem. Why? Because if it's a curse, only a handful of classes in the game can dispel that. If it is a magic effect, then only a very few classes in the game can dispel that. That's Paladin and Priest only. But when you start saying things like it's a disease, well, that's, shamans can dispel that. I think, druids can dispel that. Paladins can dispel that. Priests can dispel that. There's only a handful of that's 4 out of 9 of the classes in the game. There's only a handful of classes that can't actually dispel diseases off of them. What's worse is that you have access to consumables in the game. Even something as simple as the damn Widow Shield. It's like Widow. There's a shield in the game that dispels diseases off the target. Anyways, it's so much easier to get rid of diseases than it is to get rid of anything else. So the moment it says disease, my eyes roll in the back of my head, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Well, that's not going to be super useful or super valuable, which I find interesting. All right, so that's what they got going on there. Let's move on. Circle of Healing, going to be pretty much useless in PvP unless you're going like a full healer spec. In which case you'd want to pair Circle of Healing with Serendipity and just go to town for as long as your mana bar allows. Party him at 15 yards by a good bit of healing. Not the worst thing in the world from a battleground healer perspective. Mind Seer. Gain the Mind Seer ability. Causes an explosion of shadow magic around the target, causing a bunch of shadow damage every 1 second for 5 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards of the target. This thing is going to be absolutely... I think this is going to be a super powerful in battlegrounds that are basically pugs, where people are dumb enough to all concentrate in one small area where AoE can really do its job. But in rated battlegrounds and in 1v1 PvP, this thing basically looks like it sucks. I'm not entirely sure what the cooldown on this thing is. Let me look at it. Let me take a drink of water. I'm talking quite fast. Yeah, I don't know what this thing actually might be really good or it might be really bad in PvP. Really hard to say. Depends on the mana cost. Depends on how often you can cast it. Is it just another dot? If it's another dot, then hell yeah, let's go for it. But of course, it's opportunity costed against other things down here, such as Penance. Launch a volley of holy light at the target, causing blah healing, damage. What the hell? Didn't realize it causes damage. Causing damage to the enemy or healing to an ally instantly every 1 second for 2 seconds. This thing is like legitimately insane. The only reason why you wouldn't want to take Penance theoretically is that you couldn't use it in Shadow form, because when in Shadow form you can't use holy abilities. I'm assuming this also includes Penance, but I could be wrong about that. And of course there's always Shadow Word Death down here, which is, the Shadow Word Death has a lot of PvP utility to it. I also don't know if you can use Penance on yourself. If you can use Penance on yourself, then hell yeah, we're taking it. If you can't use Penance on yourself, then hell no, we're not. You might take Shadow Word Death instead. Shadow Word Death has a interesting utility behind it, in the sense that it can act like a break out of CC ability. So, for example, a mage is about to sheep you. You put Shadow Word Death on him. It eventually ticks and doesn't kill the mage, and so instead it deals damage to you, breaking you out of the sheep. A really good, really powerful ability, has a lot of utility behind it. A lot of PvPers love Shadow Word Death. They'll probably be taking Shadow Word Death over anything else available here, unless Penance is able to heal on self in some special builds and so forth and so on. Shadow Word Death, really terrifying. It is what it is. It does cost a fair bit of mana, if my memory serves. Come on, show it to me. No. Okay. Nah, I guess it's not telling us how much mana it costs. But yeah, a lot of utility. Shadow Word Death, amazing spell. Definitely going to be taken. All right, but already you can see there's not too much DPS increased. We got a Shadow Word Death increase, which is a damage increase, but it can just as easily backfire. If the target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, it can also be dispelled. This other damage increase, other than Twisted Fate, can easily be dispelled by many a class. Yeah, it is what it is. So again, we're looking at maybe a 30% DPS increase at best so far. And then we come to the final runes, but I don't think there's any real DPS increase whatsoever. So we got Searing Pain here. Your Shadow Word Pain now also afflicts 2 additional nearby targets within 15 yards. Absolutely amazing under a vast majority of circumstances in like battlegrounds and PvP. For a 1v1, this thing is absolutely useless. It's not even a DPS increase whatsoever. You have Prayer of Mending, places a spell of healing on the target. This is basically like Poor Man's Earth Shield. When the next time the target takes damage, when the heal... Next time the target takes damage or receives healing, God damn it. Place a spell on the target that heals them for blah the next time the target takes damage or healing. When the heal occurs, Prayer Mending jumps to a party or raid member within 20 yards. Jumps up to 5 times, last 30 seconds, blah, 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 blah. I can see this thing being absolute bullshit if you have a pet, like a skeleton summoning pet, and the Prayer Mending is just bouncing back and forth between the two of you. But other than that, it's just okay. It's more healing for priests, if that makes any sense. You have Power Word Barrier. Summons a holy barrier to protect all party and raid members. It's basically the old school original, damn it, what is it? The thing Death Knights would put on the ground, like the anti-magic zone that they would physically put in the ground. And if you were physically inside that zone, magic damage would be reduced by a fairly large percentage. This thing reduces all damage taken by 25%, and it lasts 10 seconds, which is pretty good. But from a PvP context, this is either absolutely amazing or hot garbage. It's really hard to tell. Seems like something that would be very matchup specific, if that makes any sense. It would definitely help you survive bursts depending upon the cooldown of this thing. So, for example, there's a lot of classes in the game that'll try to burst you out of existence in Classic World of Warcraft, and this is definitely one of the things that will help you with that. But as we'll talk about in a second, it doesn't help you survive the one class where you desperately need something like this in order to survive. All right, Homunculi. Breaks off splinters of your soul. Animate 3 miniature copies of yourself to attack the target with a sword, a mace, and an axe, and increasing attack speed, attack power, and armor respectively. Reducing attack speed, attack power, and armor respectively of the hit. This is both. This is probably one of the. For most people who don't look too deep into the class, this is probably the no-brainer PvP one that they're going to take. It is because it is both an offense and a defense ability. I have no idea how long these animated jerk-offs last, or particularly what they do, but because it's both offense and defense, it's not the worst thing in the world. There's a lot of questions about this thing as to how good it's going to be or how bad it's going to be, like that kind of a thing. But let's just talk about the class in general now. So, if you don't know about Shadow Priest, or just Priest in general, there are basically 2 PvP specs predominantly. There's Discipline, and then there is Shadow. Now, you almost never see Discipline in PvP tournaments. You almost always see Shadow in PvP tournaments. Damn it, I need to cough real fast here. Give me a sec. All right, we're back. Cough, drink water, talking real quick here. Kind of sucks. Okay, so you almost always see Shadow Priest, and you almost never see Disc Priest. What a lot of people don't know, however, is that Disc Priest Smite is actually super powerful and overpowered as all hell. And one of the reasons why the Smite spec is overpowered as all hell, the Disc Priest, I should say, Smite spec is overpowered at all hell. That's not right. What the? Damn it. That's a reduced one? Really? Really? Smite. All right, give me the max rank here. 8, okay. 8's max rank Smite. Okay, cool. Crank it up to level 60. Look at its spell power ratio according to Wowhead. Smite's spell power ratio is a whopping 71%. This is actually legitimately insane, and when you run into a legitimate Shadow, a Smite Paladin, they will do more damage than you've ever seen any priest ever do in your entire life, and they are legitimately terrifying. Disciplined Smite priests are no joke in Classic World of Warcraft, to the point where it's always been a mystery to me, like why the hell I never see them in PvP. But after talking to Talrain, I think I figured it out. And the answer is Disc Priests don't have anything that helps them survive rogues. So, for example, a Shadow Priest can barely survive the opening of a rogue if you've ever actually watched PvP tournaments. And they do that primarily off the back of their 15% damage reduction from Shadow Form. Without that 15% Shadow Form reduction, Disciplined Priest cannot survive, to my knowledge, a burst from a rogue. And that is their one major weakness. In many ways, Disciplined Priest is superior to Shadow Priest. Many ways. Disciplined Priest is superior in PvP than Shadow Priest. It's definitely going to be superior than Shadow Priest with all these stupid little runes flying around. But at the end of the day, if you haven't noticed, not a single rune that's going to benefit Discipline actually helps them survive a rogue burst opening. And I have to assume that rogues have actually gone up in DPS to a, enough of a degree that it's still a problem. Disciplined Priests do not have pain suppression in Classic World of Warcraft. They don't have it. They have nothing here other than extra armor to help them survive the attentions of a rogue. And that's a massive problem for them. All right, cool. Moving on. And I think that basically just ends the story of Shadow Priest. So the TLDR basically on not on Priest in general, is that while I am objectively terrified of Disciplined Priests in Classic World of Warcraft, I'm kind of painfully aware that if they still have that primary weakness against rogues, you're just not going to see them. You're mainly going to see the Shadow Priest, because at least theoretically they might still be able to survive the openings and the attentions of a rogue. If the Disciplined Priest can ever get to the point where they can actually find a way to survive the opening and attentions of a rogue, they will be easily the better and more objective class. However, they still have their main mana weakness. If you notice, there was nothing in here that allows them to get mana back whatsoever, and that's still their one primary and main weakness. They did go up at least, I would say about 30% damage in the grand scheme of things. They went up, so they have to choose between going up in survivability significantly, as long as they're not being stun locked and given the business, or they have to choose between going up like 30% increase in damage, if that makes any sense. The only thing that might save them against a rogue is Homunculi, depending upon how much it actually reduces the damage. I don't think Power Word Barrier is going to save them against the attentions of a rogue. It's just a really big problem dealing with rogue. Maybe Prayer of Mending could do enough healing to save them against a rogue, but there's probably an easy way for rogues to play around that. It's just so hard to deal with rogues. You have no idea how hard it is for a Disciplined Priest to deal with rogues. Holy crap. They don't have pain suppression, and it is really kind of sad. They needed, DPS-wise, they just needed something. But other than that, if you can't burst them in CC, Disciplined Priest is going to be a monster. Other than rogues, Disciplined Priest is I can foresee it absolutely being an insane monstrosity in Classic World of Warcraft. From a Paladin perspective, Paladins, how do I put this? Paladins got this annoying little thing. Let me find it. Is it on gloves? I think it's gloves. Crusader Strike. whoever the hell thought it was a good idea to give Paladins Crusader Strike, and particularly this kind of Crusader Strike in Classic World of Warcraft, needs to be punched in the dick. Why is this? Well, if you actually do the math on this free, no spell cost, deals damage, and recovers mana, this thing is basically the equivalent of another Seal of Wisdom. So I'll give you an example, right? So I did the math. Seal of Wisdom plus Judgment of Wisdom is basically regenerating like 90 mana in a given amount of time at like max level for a Paladin. If you have like 6,000 mana, Crusader Strike by comparison is generating like 120. I could be wrong about that. That might be without the Judgment. That might just be the seal on itself is regenerating X, and then this is outpacing it by a fair bit of margin. But just know that if you, as a Paladin, if you're engaging somebody in a mana war, Crusader Strike is bullshit, and Seal of Wisdom already was bullshit, particularly in mana wars versus certain classes. So you start rolling up on them Crusader Strike and Seal of Wisdom, it's not going to be a fun time for many a class in the game, if that makes any sense. Yeah, and it doesn't really come at the cost of anything currently. It's like opportunity costed against what? Hand of Reckoning to help you survive bursts, or Beacon of Light, which does nothing for you in PvP whatsoever. There's not enough here to opportunity cost you away from Crusader Strike in the grand scheme of things. Aegis, Lordaeron, Martyrdom, Divine Storm, is what it is. So yeah, so I take one look at them still not doing enough DPS to really threaten a Paladin. I look at them still having their mana war issue. And I'm just like, all right, well, you're just going to get Mana Ward out of Oblivion, and that's just not going to be a matchup pretty much no matter what you do. You'd have to be a Smite Paladin in order to even remotely threaten a Paladin in PvP, just because Smite does so much fucking damage that you don't really have time to beat on them to regenerate your mana. You're stuck kind of healing yourself. Smite Paladins will heal lock you. If you've never actually fought Smite Paladins, if you've never fought a Disciplined Smite Priest before, they do something stupid like 2,000 holy damage in a 2-second cast. And what happens is that you can barely out-heal that until it starts critting the shit out of you. And once, basically what happens is they cast Smite, you're casting Holy Lights, they keep casting Smite, you keep casting Holy Lights, and eventually you die. Because that's how much fucking damage they do with their 71% spell power fucking ratio. It is legitimately terrifying to try to out-heal a Disciplined Priest if they have managed to do enough damage to you to heal lock you. Disciplined Priests scare the crap out of me. That's all I'm going to say. They scare the absolute living crap out of me. And they are the one thing where I will... you have to take... Hand of Reckoning for the increased healing capability. So like I said in a previous video, Hand of Reckoning's hidden gem behind it is it doesn't just increase your healing capability by 25% when you're following. When you desperately need a healing increase, it helps you survive and gear differently heal locks. So Hand of Reckoning definitely going to be taken against Disciplined Priest, but that means you don't get Crusader Strike, which means they can probably engage you in a mana war a little bit better than they otherwise could. And Disciplined Priests are, they get improved mana burn, and that is, yeah, so I'm scared of Disciplined Priests. Shadow Priests are going to be laughable, and they're going to die horribly. It's the TLDR and all that. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to go right into making the Warlock video, because I got a lot to say about the Warlock as well. Days Vote, boys.